This religion-based tax is designed to indicate, as the renowned Islamic scholar Ibn Kathir explained, that the non-Muslims who are paying it are disgraced, humiliated, and belittled. The non-Muslims in this state of disgrace and humiliation are not allowed to build new houses of worship or repair old ones, so their communities are in a perpetual state of decline. They are forbidden to make any public display of their religion. They're relegated to the most menial jobs in society, for they are forbidden to hold authority over Muslims. If they say anything critical about Islam, Muhammad, or the Quran, they're liable to be put to death. From all this, it is clear that Sharia is not simply Muslim personal religious law. On the contrary, Sharia-based legal and civic institutions are contrary to America's founding principles and violate federal law and the Constitution in numerous particulars. The death penalty for mentioning what Reliance of the Traveler terms as something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam, that is blasphemy, is directly at variance with First Amendment freedom of speech protections. The Islamic imperative to establish the hegemony of Sharia as the law of the land, as in today in the Islamic Republic of Iran, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, is obviously at variance with the First Amendment principle of non-establishment of a religion. Even in its personal aspects, Sharia does contradict U.S. law. The Quran states that a man should beat a woman from whom he fears disobedience. That's chapter 4, verse 34. Domestic violence is a crime in U.S. law, but it is not a crime under Sharia. And we have the example of what happened in Britain. Britain began establishing Sharia courts several years ago with the understanding that cases that came under the purview of British criminal law would be referred to the British criminal courts. Instead, the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal on its website urged the Crown Prosecution Service to reconsider bringing criminal charges against Muslim men who'd been accused of domestic violence. And as this is in the Quran, the same thing would happen here. As Sharia is considered divine law, those Muslims who adhere to it always consider that it takes precedence over the laws of the land. Moreover, emigration to a new land to bring Sharia to it is also an Islamic imperative. The Quran in chapter 4, verse 100 promises a reward from Allah to those who emigrate for the sake of Allah, which means for the purpose of bringing Sharia to a non-Muslim land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. Appreciate your testimony. Ms. Child, again, remind you to turn your microphone on, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of Congress. I'm Krista Shield, the Texas State Director for Rare Foundation USA. I stand before you from deep love for America, our Constitution, and the religious liberties it guarantees every citizen. As a Christian who cherishes this nation, I fiercely defend its founding principles of freedom, equality, and self-governance. On September 11th, 2001, as an American Airlines flight attendant, I watched the second plane slam into the tower. My heart sank. The world changed in that moment. Freedom itself was under siege. After 9/11, we believed the war was far away. Our brave military went overseas to fight. We thought we were safe, but we were tragically wrong. A planned invasion took root, concealed and deliberate. Foreign and Islamic terror-tied networks quietly infiltrated every layer of Texas life while we looked away. I travel across Texas listening to communities. Residents tell me their neighborhoods are becoming unrecognizable. Streets once familiar now echo with foreign calls to prayer that drown out church bells. Sons who fought these very forces abroad return to find their hometowns starting to resemble the Middle East that they risked their lives to defend us against. Texas is ground zero for the Islamic conquest of America. We are deep into a 1,400-year Islamic immigration conquest pattern, a patient, relentless strategy of settlement, infiltration, and eventual dominance. The Muslim Brotherhood's 1991 explanatory memorandum entered in federal court calls it a, quote, civilization jihadist process to destroy the West from within. That plan has been capturing Texas for over 35 years. We now have Over 330 mosques. CARE calls them, quote, our infrastructure. Erdogan calls them, quote, our barracks. At least 650 Islamic nonprofits channeling influence. Dozens of Islamic scholars and banks promoting Sharia compliance finance. More than $4 billion in taxpayer funds routed to Islamic entities since 2017. Our own money fueling our demise. Islamic leaders telling us they want to implement Sharia. They glorify chopping off hands, killing homosexuals, wife beating, child marriage without apology. Aggressive conversion campaigns, including terror-tied groups, enter public schools without parental consent to distribute Qurans, Sharia pamphlets, and hijabs to students. The East Plano Islamic Center, EPIC, rebranded, quote, the Meadows, an enclave led by Imam Yasser Qadi, who calls Jews and Christians, quote, evils, and demands Islamic theocracy over democracy. These are emerging no-go zones. Active Sharia courts. In the last legislative session, 2 Pakistani-born representatives introduced over 20 bills advancing Sharia, mandating halal in Texas schools, Muslim Heritage Month, quote, Islamophobia censorship laws to silence critics. We already see Sharia enforcement in Texas, patrols pressuring Houston Muslim businesses to conform, imams berating Muslims for speaking to Christians, and families imposing deadly punishments on those who refuse to submit. My own family was connected to 2 young Texas girls who chose to date non-Muslims. They were murdered by their own father for not conforming to Islam. That pain drives me every day. These examples are not isolated. This is not assimilation. It is strategic infiltration and conquest. It is patient, multi-generational, and often funded by taxpayers. If we do not act, Sharia will dominate. We're here today to bring you legislative evidence and have submitted that to prove to you that wherever Islam grows, freedom dies. We must choose freedom under the Constitution or submission to Islam. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shield. And I will now recognize Professor Soman. Again, a reminder to turn your microphone on. You have 5 minutes.
I thank the subcommittee for the opportunity to address these important issues. George Washington wrote that America was founded in part to create an asylum for the poor and oppressed of all nations and religions. Thomas Jefferson, among others, made clear that American religious freedom is supposed to extend to Muslims no less than to Christians, Jews, and others. George Washington and Jefferson, they were right, whereas the proposed Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act is wrong. If enacted and upheld by the courts, it would expel tens of thousands of people from the United States just because of their religion by virtue of making any non-citizen adherent of Sharia law subject to exclusion or deportation. That violates the First Amendment, and it would do nothing to improve American national security. Indeed, the only real winners would be radical Islamist terrorists who would benefit from this by getting a free propaganda victory. The Constitution in the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That clearly protects freedom of religion against discrimination, and it applies to Muslims no less than to any other religious group. And almost all Muslims, to some degree or another, are Sharia law adherents because Sharia law is simply the religious precepts of Islam. Muslims disagree a lot among themselves about what exactly those precepts mean and how they should be applied, but nonetheless, a law targeting Sharia law adherents, it targets Muslims in much the same way as a law targeting adherents of Talmudic law would target Jews, or a law targeting adherents of canon law targets Catholics. The Supreme Court has also ruled that the Free Speech Clause protects religious freedom and expression, and does this law, if enacted, would violate the Free Speech Clause as well. And it does not matter that this law addresses non-citizen immigrants because there is no immigration exception to the First Amendment. When it says that Congress shall make no law restricting freedom of speech or the free exercise of religion, that means no law, no exceptions. It also does not matter that non-citizens don't have a constitutional right to be in the United States. The Supreme Court, including in decisions by conservative justices, has repeatedly made clear that discrimination against religious believers with respect to government benefits that are not constitutional rights still violates the Free Exercise Clause and also in some cases the Free Speech Clause. For example, there's no constitutional right to Social Security benefits, but if Congress were to pass a law saying only Christians are entitled to such benefits, that would obviously be a violation of the First Amendment. If enacted and wrongly upheld by the courts, this law would set a dangerous precedent because it could easily be used to target any religious believers of any kind who run afoul of the views of the majority, including conservative Christians, among others. This law also would cause great harm to innocent people. It would expel hundreds of thousands of people from the United States who have done no wrong and pose no threat. Survey data shows the vast majority of Muslims in the United States do not support terrorism, do not support the creation of some kind of Islamic theocracy or anything of the kind. Indeed, many of the Muslims in the United States are actually immigrants who fled oppression at the hands of radical Islamist regimes like those of Iran and the Taliban in Afghanistan. Many of the latter are actually people who aided U.S. forces in the war on terror. They do not deserve to be excluded and deported.